Hello, everyone. We're a couple minutes late here, but we're slowly having people join today. Um, my name is Gwen Irusi. I am the president of Associated for Software Testing, or Association for Software Testing. I am live here with Mr. Joe Tibola. Okay, let me get this right. Is it Tibola?
Yep.
Okay, Tibola.
Yep. You got it.
With Gravity IT, which is a recruiting firm, consulting firm here in the Salt Lake area, Silicon Slopes area. Joe, why don't you since we're just kind of getting started, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing over at Gravity?
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So as Gwen mentioned, I'm a managing partner and co-founder at Gravity IT. We're an IT recruiting and staffing consulting company. I'm here in Salt Lake City. We've got 10. We're nationwide. We've got 10 offices around the country. So, we're focused on really anything technology related as it relates to recruiting and staffing, both full time recruiting as well as contract staff augmentation staffing, and we do a lot of things in the U.S. as well as around Latin America. So we
Awesome.
support customers with U.S. based resources as well as all across Latin America. So that's kind of who we are, and I'm excited to be part of the conversation today, and I'm sure we'll talk about challenges in hiring and all of that good stuff. So
Yeah. So, yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about the job market today, about things that uh, individual job seekers can do. We're going to talk a little bit about the market conditions out there, what Joe is seeing from the consulting and the recruiting side of things. We will be having some of our partners from Western Governors University join us a little bit later, and hopefully provide some guidance on kind of the areas that they are seeing. Where like the hottest areas that people are looking for in the market right now, and some of the things that continuing education can do, and some of the offerings out there for upskilling and or if you're looking to get into tech, which so let's set the stage there, because I think there is quite a bit going on in the sector. I was doing some research on the topic last night just to see kind of what the market is looking like, what the trends are, and I found it very, very interesting. So I mean, there's the trends that you kind of see on LinkedIn, and you kind of see people looking for work, people struggling to get in front of hiring managers. Um, from a hiring perspective, Joe, what are you seeing companies struggling with? We'll start there, because I think we see a lot of job seekers and their perspective, right?
mhm.
But I'd like to kind of start it from, what are we seeing from the hiring end? What's going on from
Yeah.
that side of things?
Yeah, just kind of I guess on a macro scale, like we're seeing most companies, most people that are hiring being just really cautious with what they're investing in and who they're investing in, and how they want to hire. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out this whole AI thing, right?
Yeah.
How is that going to change the way we do work? How is that going to change the people we hire? How's it going to change the people that are currently on the team? And I think everybody's in this, trying to find answers kind of stage. Like, how's that going to impact us as a company? How do we leverage it? How do we harness it?
Yeah.
And how does that change kind of who we hire? So um, there's a lot of caution around that, like wanting to hire the right people to make sure we're not overextending when, can a job be done using AI, and can we
Right.
reskill that person to do something else? And then, from a economically, I think most companies are being very cautious with just how they spend too, taking the AI out of it. Just,
Right.
what do we want to invest in? What's around the corner from an economic standpoint? And how much do we want to invest in whatever we're doing, right? So
Right. Right.
there's a lot of uncertainty there. I don't know if that answered your question. And then, from a hiring standpoint, I think again, we're seeing a lot. Well, maybe if you don't want me to go here yet, but
No,
a
no,
lot,
you go wherever. Yeah.
a lot of push in. We're trying to figure out. Companies are trying to figure out. Again, kind of tailoring in the AI conversation. Security is becoming more and more prevalent. How do we secure everything? So,
Yeah.
trying to find and hire people in the security space, information security, GRC, you name it. I
Right.
think most companies are very focused on putting together the right security programs, putting in place the right security programs and that was big before, but even, and now it's just more of a topic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what we're seeing a lot of.
Yeah, it's weird because not being so I'm not currently hiring right now. I've certainly been a hiring manager historically, but I am on LinkedIn quite a bit and have a rather large network within the quality and testing space. Um, and it's the thing. There's like this paradox going on right now because you have companies especially in the U.S. and I think this is probably global, but they keep talking about tech shortages. They keep talking about having more positions than they can fill, and just not being able to find the right talent to fill those roles. Um, and then you also have, from the opposite angle, right? You have
Mhm.
all of these people who are out there looking for work,
Right.
and admittedly, I mean, if you look at the numbers, right, the unemployment rate is relatively low, especially in the tech market.
Right.
And I don't know, there's always question as to how accurate those numbers really are, but what they're a gauge, right? They should be
Right.
telling us a little bit. Um, and so I find it interesting. And is there have you seen any trends in terms of what's going on there? Like there's been kind of some news going on around fake, you know, some of the AI actually faking um, applicants, actually
Mhm.
faking jobs. Like what's happening there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's really it's such an interesting topic because kind of you touched on both things. Like on one end, if you read the news and look at the unemployment rate, you think, okay, companies are hiring like crazy. They can't find enough good people. And then on the other hand, we're talking to candidates every day,
yeah,
and I've been doing this work for nearly 30 years, so a long time. And it's never been a market like this where a lot of people are still getting laid off. A lot of people and people that are out of work are generally staying out of work longer than what I've seen to be
yeah,
normal in the
yeah,
past. There's having a hard time kind of finding new work. Um, you talk to a lot of people that are a perfect match for a job that they've applied for, and they don't even get a call back. Like, so like, are there just that many applicants, or are they being screened out by an AI tool, and not even getting to a point where they're being reviewed? So I think there's a lot of companies and people just trying to figure that world out. But
right,
I think what we're seeing is it doesn't feel like a really strong market right now, no
yeah,
matter kind of what you read. I think it's getting better than the last couple of years. I think
yeah,
feels like things are getting back to a little more steady state. But yeah, we're still talking to people daily that, especially um, senior leaders, leadership people in the leadership ranks
yeah,
are having a hard time finding work, getting back to work if they've been riffed or lost a job. They're staying out of work a lot longer.
yeah,
And then on the other end of it, in the entry level ranks, I think that world's changing a lot too. People coming out of college with a CS degree, for example, that maybe want to be a developer. Companies are, they're trying to figure out, hey, how much of this can we do with AI, and how many junior developers do we really need, right?
right,
I'm kind of all over the place, but that's kind of, we're seeing, people on the low end, entry level, kind of struggling to get started.
yeah,
People kind of on the higher end, senior level folks struggling to get back to work if they've been out of work because there aren't as many, I guess aren't as many opportunities, not as many people leaving jobs to move and opening up jobs too, because they're kind of worried about the stability of things. Um, and then kind of the in between seems kind of pretty stable, if that makes sense. I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
But,
Well, and you bring up an interesting point. So some of the trends I was looking at here is that organizations do seem to be kind of drifting away from hiring entry level talent at the moment, which I found interesting. Um, and you talk about the more senior. That's the one that I think it gets a little confusing to me
Mhm.
because, you look at what's going on now. You look at the surge of AI and the ability to automate a lot of, not a lot, but a good amount of activities that may be correlating and partnering with some of these roles. Um, and you would think that the leadership roles and the ability to kind of coordinate and orchestrate that and lead the staff that are there, um, whether it be in delivery teams or helping quality teams or helping development teams, you name it, right?
Mhm.
um, you would think that those would be more in demand.
Right.
um, and it does seem like there is this disconnect because you do have individuals who, like, you have companies who again are going, well, we can't find these leaders. And
Right.
then you have a bunch of leaders going, well, wait a minute, like, we're
Mhm.
out here, hi,
Yep.
and we've been applying for so long.
Yep. Yeah.
And yeah, and so any thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, I mean, you hit it on the head. And I think, and I'm seeing Griffin's kind of comment here about,
Yeah.
seeing companies freezing hiring across roles as skill sets because they're trying to figure out what they need. I think that's a really accurate point. Like, people are kind of frozen, right? So,
Right.
and I think these leadership roles, people, a lot of them are staying unfilled for a long time. I think in some cases because companies don't know what they need and they're trying to figure
Right.
that out, and they're interviewing folks, and I think the people that are gonna, whether they're in companies and they're growing careers, or they're looking for jobs and getting into jobs. And I hate to keep harping on kind of the AI topic, but
Yeah.
people that can express and display how they're going to help manage companies through this change, and how they're going to help companies figure out how to implement AI and how to use it
Yeah.
properly, and what kind of skill sets you need to wrap around it to make it work. I think those are the people that are going to really do well kind of in
Yeah.
the coming years. I had a conversation yesterday with a C-level leader, and we were talking about AI specifically around QA, right? And how around software testing. And he said, yeah, there are a lot of great tools that can do a lot of work, that a QA analyst would do, but
Right.
you still need the human element to
Yeah.
check that work and make sure it's working correctly. And same thing goes
Yep.
for developers. I think a lot of companies are trying to say, hey, we can do without these junior level developers and have these AI tools do a lot of this work, which is true. But you've got to have somebody that knows how to develop software,
Right.
keeping an eye on that and directing the AI agents to do what they need to do. So there's going to be a gap
Right.
where, here's my fear, where none of these junior level developers learn how to program and learn how to code to direct these AI tools. And eventually, it's a scary thought. And how, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but how do we make sure that gap doesn't get bigger as companies are trying to figure this out, and people
Yeah.
aren't, people new in careers, you have to learn, somehow. So maybe the learning
Yeah.
is, it's going to be a different kind of learning, maybe a different kind of skill set moving forward.
Yeah. And that is a great caveat. Um, uh, as we have had a new guest join, um, from WGU, and actually, let me hide this a little bit. Jared. Jared joins us from Western Governors University. Jared, do you want to give us a little overview of who you are and Western Governors in general?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm the Associate Dean and Director for Software Engineering at Western Governors. I do play a role over computer science a lot, and other AI initiatives within the program itself. I sit on the Academic Policy Committee for the university, and so go to certain conferences and everything. Basically, my role really is building bachelor's and master's degrees, and then getting
Okay.
thousands and thousands of students through them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Awesome. And so, and we've been, just to kind of bring you up to speed on where we're at in the conversation, we've just been kind of talking about the market right now. And you could kind of see in the comments, There's a lot of puzzlement, I think, across the industry right now in terms of, you have this paradox of companies like, you know, the numbers, the metric I saw just looking at it before we joined is like 90% of companies are looking at tech shortages right now, and moving into the next decade, and and you have this consistent frustration, and we've heard it in the news, and I don't want to even get into the whole politicized piece of this, but you hear some of these tech leaders out there going, we just can't find the talent, right? We aren't seeing the talent. And then you have on the other side of it all of this talent, amazing talent with decades of experience, and or who have come through incredible programs, who are sitting here going, hey, we're here, we're trying to get to you. And so that is a struggle, and you're seeing it in the feed right now, right? Like, and Paul mentioned it really well, right? It's baffling that testing roles aren't as in high demand right now. Like, and this is weird because those of us who've been in the industry long enough, we've seen the ebb and flow, right? Like, people find it very high value, and like stuff goes wrong, people are like, oh, we need to amp up testing, and so they amp up testing, and it goes really, really well for a few years, and then there's this other, like, the industry kind of does this ebb where they're kind of like, oh, we don't need testers, developers can test their own stuff, it's fine. And then things go wrong again. And then they're like, oh, no, we need to amp up the testing again. And that's just kind of been the nature of things. But I do think it is an interesting thing, especially on the verge of AI coming into the picture. All of these new technologies that are really almost changing the way that we compute and interact with technology. And, to your point, Joe, right? Like, who's testing the tester? Who's testing the automation? Who's testing the tools that are vibe coding, like, that are allowing this stuff to happen, and making sure that they're not flawed. And that's where this quality piece kind of becomes an interesting story, and I think it is worth talking a little bit. So from your perspective, Jared, like, what are the skill sets and competencies that you're seeing kind of most in demand today?
Yeah, I think one thing I think important to note, I think, is that companies all over the place, they like to cut corners, right? And I think that that's what we're seeing right now is AI is now this opportunity that a lot of companies are seeing, saying, oh, we can cut a corner. I think the software industry, I think, has kind of this implosion about to happen from design debt, right? Where basically the corners have been cut so significantly that basically companies are holding on to whatever they can, patching and breaking things. And so I think what's interesting is it's in an evolution of technology, what you always get is you get basically there's an expectation that students graduating will be able to use these AI tools. But I think the way the companies believe these AI tools will impact them is probably not completely in sync yet. Basically what happens is that the AI tools regurgitate what's essentially already out there.
Mm-hmm.
So solving simple problems is easy with AI. Solving hard problems is not, and that's what we hire these individuals for.
Right.
And so, for instance, yes, we can create smoke tests to go through, and we can automate those. We've been doing that since the '90s, right? So it's not like that's anything new. But the thing is to really break the software, to really find the problems.
Yeah.
You really have to have a skill set that isn't really there. You got to get people to think creatively.
Yeah.
You have to make them understand how to interact with them.
Right. No, and you're absolutely right. And I will say, there is an aspect of this that I did want to touch on a little bit, because I think one of the things that has bothered me about the industry, and this goes for all of the disciplines, it doesn't matter what we're talking about, whether it's quality, whether it's development, whether it's DevOps, you name it. There feels like, and as a hiring manager and a leader within that space, it feels like there's kind of a watering down of skill sets, and this, I think organizations kind of get in this place of, well, we'll just promote people who've proven to do really great things, maybe in one area, and we'll just throw them into this because of course they're going to figure it out, right? And I don't know about you, like like those people are very rare. Like those are your unicorns, right? And it was funny because there's someone in the thread here was talking about why can't I find cheap unicorns with 12 years of experience. um the people who are unicorns, who live and breathe this stuff, and have those kind of natural abilities to kind of get systems right. They get technology systems, they get computing systems, um, and they're able to come up to speed on new technologies, on new applications, on new solutions very, very quickly. And that's probably like, I don't know, maybe 3%, right? Like 5% maybe of talent out there. Like those people are very, very rare. Um, and then on the other extreme, right, you have people who are getting into these roles who don't really take it on themselves to grow their career, right? They're not building the skills they need to really thrive. um and I think you are seeing an effect on that, especially, and maybe not in like the product companies, the small startups that are kind of on that bleeding technology edge, but you're definitely seeing it in kind of the larger enterprises, and maybe company that are enterprise type tech environments, right? Joe, is that something that is that something you can speak to? Like, are you guys seeing trends in that area?
Yeah, let me just make sure in what area exactly.
So just the watering down, like the kind of competencies that individuals have. Like they will say, I'm a developer, and
Mm-hmm.
then you find that they kind of took an introduction to programming class, or they lead engineering teams and they've never coded a line of code in their life,
Yeah.
or they coded COBOL, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
back in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
and then they want to lead teams
Mm-hmm.
that are working with AI tech,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Are you
Yep.
seeing that? Like, what's
Seeing a lot of that for sure. And
yeah,
I think that, yeah, for sure, that, and that goes back to kind of this, I think what I was saying earlier, maybe I didn't, trying to make the point of companies. Yeah, they've hired people and people are in positions, and I think they're realizing, okay, you know, do we have the right people in place that can help us continue to grow? And in some cases, the answer is no, right? So how do they
right?
address that? How do they address that? And I think the point's been made by both of you is, and this probably hasn't changed from when we all got into the industry to now, is hiring inquisitive people that want to learn,
Mhm.
that want to learn, forget, relearn, because you're going to have
Yeah,
to keep, you kind of, I think with what's going on now with all the AI tools and just how technology is changing so fast, I think that the people that are going to be most successful are those that can kind of learn something, forget it, relearn something, because it's constantly changing. So people are going to have to relearn and reteach themselves as they go. So
oh yeah,
being
100%.
inquisitive, being like, back in the day, I think, and I again, back in the day, because I've been doing this a long time. Yeah. A Java developer could, learn Java, get a job, continue to learn the new version of Java, and have a really good career. And without having to reskill too much. You didn't,
Yeah,
stuff wasn't changing so fast where they had to constantly kind of reskill. I think now in technology, what we're seeing with not only AI, but cloud technologies. You mentioned DevOps earlier. Like people are having to reskill quickly all the time, and if
right.
they're not doing that, then they're falling behind, and then they're becoming and then they are becoming maybe unemployable in the space because they haven't continued to reskill and learn. If
Yeah,
that makes sense. And then from what we see, because we're kind of in this all day, and then you've got people that have been, say, doing work, whether it's QA development, whatever, for 10, 15, 20 years, making a certain amount of money. And this is where the kind of the industry's we're in a weird spot right now, that maybe haven't reskilled, and so they're applying for new jobs, but they're maybe not qualified because they haven't been learning, staying
right.
up with technology. They demand a certain salary because that's what they're used to, and then they're not going to get it, right. That's we're seeing that as a problem as
Yeah,
well, right. So
yeah,
I guess long way to say, I think people are going to have to be really aggressive about being continuous learners, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I do think there are people that get comfortable in this space. I've certainly seen it in the testing space, and I have the unique opportunity to be a part of the training side of things and really bringing people into. So I partner with tech moms and do some training for them. I've done some training for in prior roles for a consulting company that I worked for, both in the quality space and in the cybersecurity space. And it's interesting. I pass on one of the, and I think I mentioned it even on the last live stream that we had. One of the earliest pieces of advice that I was given, and this was back when I was a young kid at 19, 20 years old, just getting into this market, just getting into the industry and learning, learning the basics. And I had a professor say, if you are not up for the challenge of continuously learning new things and continuously upping your skill set, this is the wrong industry for you. And I mean, that has proven true time and time and time again in my career. And it's certainly a value I think that we push over at AST, association, as we kind of work with the larger global quality community. We really challenge, things that aren't necessarily like, whether it's credentialing through some of these micro credentialing programs, or it's just sitting down and taking on a project, right? Like it's thinking outside the box a little bit and like making it fun for yourself to like really invest in yourself and the skill sets that you need to be competitive. And I have found that to be a problem even in the classes that I've taught. And so that's one aspect of it, is just the desire and the drive. And the drive to actually keep going and to keep learning new things. And then on the opposite side of it, there are some skills, and I think, Jared, this kind of ties back to some of the stuff that you were talking about. There are some skills that you simply can't teach, right? Like you can't teach curiosity. you can't
We can try.
grit. Well, you can, and I think it's more of an influence thing, right? Like as someone who has done it, I think the energy that I believe that the energy that you bring to the table in whatever you're doing, whether it's leading, coaching, mentoring, training, you name it, is going to set an example, right? And as someone who has done that, I think that's always something that you kind of hold. You hope that you're kind of influencing, right? Like you hope that you're helping them understand the importance of, digging in and just playing and experimenting, right? But I do
I think you can, though. I think you can teach curiosity. I think that. So what happens a lot of times when we have a student come into a program like software engineering, or any of these high tech ones, right? We get a lot of students who are attracted to the paycheck, and they're like, okay, we're going to come in, and so one of the things I've learned over the years is I never tell a student they're not a programmer. Maybe in all the years of teaching and all the thousands of students I've seen, I've maybe seen one student ever where I ended up having that uncomfortable conversation saying, this is probably not for you. And this was somebody who just didn't want to be ever, on a computer. Like they're like, hey, my ideal job is maybe cutting branches off a tree and being outside, like
this might not be a fit.
and so I think that's something really important is up to the individuals to really discover what it is, but it is up to them also to find out, like, hey, this is what the reality of this field is. I tell a lot of people, like, as a programmer myself, before I was in academics, I was a professional programmer, and I told them, I said, the thing is like I would go to work and code all day, and then I'd go home and code all night, like my own stuff and everything, right? There's a certain passion for it that comes. But I do think you can actually get students to understand curiosity, but you have to kind of incentivize them into it. You have to give them projects at which they end up building something, they end up seeing something, they connect with it, right? Once they do that, then they can start becoming, I think, more in the mindset that we need in the tech world. Because one of the things I like to really tell people a lot of times is that they come in with all these math and science skills, right? They were good at math and everything, and they thought they could just come in and solve a problem. And I always let them know, like we don't know how to solve these problems that you're coming into. You have to be creative. And so this field is really a creative field, even though people don't always understand that.
Right. No, I agree. I agree. I think one of the keys, like there are some key skill sets that I actually start all of my classes with. One of them is teaching them some of the human factors, the psychology, the human bias, um, type things. Helping them understand perspective and how we're all unique, and quality to one person is not going to be quality to someone else, right? And so everything's subjective, and even the types of, like, the way that your mind sees things is going to be based off of like your prior experience and how they've proven this with science time and time and time again. And so I start the class like that, um, to kind of help them understand that like all of these problems that we're trying to solve are human problems. And that's what makes it so fantastic. Like that's what gets me so excited about this industry, is that yeah, technology is a tool, and really at the center of it all is humanity, and our interactions with one another and how we're accomplishing things and how we're doing things, even when we look at AI. And so you know it's that, and then understanding kind of systems thinking, right, which I do think is in short supply today. um like we I think I think that systems theory and systems thinking in general, if we taught that to children and like really built on that, like made that part of core curriculum. We talk about getting AI into schools, right? Like that's the new trend. Everybody's got to teach AI to, second graders. Um, but it's like, no, 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 no. Let's teach the basics. Let's teach them critical thought. Let's teach them human psychology. Let's teach them, you know, how to look at things like in systems. Um, I took a coaching, like an executive coaching class. Um, Gosh, it's been 4 or 5 years now. And the individual who was leading that course, um, was saying, you can solve any problem if you master systems thinking, because everything is a system, whether it's humans, psychology, uh, whether it's computers, whether it's business. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. If you can figure out the systems at play, you're going to be able to solve those problems. And so those kind of skills. Now, and Jared, how are you guys approaching that? I mean,
Mhm.
governors, you have an entirely different way of
Yeah.
teaching and teaching. And having gone through it, I actually, like, I am being completely honest. I am a graduate of Western Governors. I got my bachelor's there. So I have, a long history with Western Governors. It was my entry into getting into higher ed. I was the first graduate within my family, and so it was kind of a big deal for me. But tell us how you are approaching some of those skills.
Yeah, I think there's two parts of this. I think first is that we had identified, especially with AI, really early, the challenges that we really see. And so, for instance, we had created a prompt engineering course. So it wasn't it was basically, what questions do you really ask these AI systems, because you have to understand, like you said, you have to understand the system, you have to understand the outputs and the inputs, and what is really happening. Everybody has seen the AI go off the rails. For any of those who've used the AI, right? Where
Yeah.
you start asking it questions, and the next thing you know, I remember when ChatGPT first came out, one of the first things I asked ChatGPT, and just to kind of test its limits, was, is it healthier to eat a peanut butter cup or an apple, right? And basically coached the AI to the point where eventually it told me it was healthier to eat a peanut butter cup, right? And the reason this
Nice.
works is because an apple is mostly sugar, right? And a peanut
Right.
butter cup is mostly fat and protein, and even
Yeah.
though there's sugar in it, they're not comparables. And so it's
Right.
interesting to see how this AI system breaks down. Getting people to understand that, I think, is really important in this. But I think the second thing is too, though, is it's part of the conversation. So one of the things that happened really early on, from a policy standpoint, was Western governors, that we had some people who just said, hey, AI is too complicated, let's just ban it across the board, right? And I was like, well, I don't think we can do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, students are going to use it, we're going to reward the cheaters, let's not do this, right? And so they're saying, but like, look, we can take our test and you pop it into ChatGPT and we get the answers, right? And I said, well, then it's time for us to ask different questions, right?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
And so I had given a talk about a year ago about this at a programming conference, and was really kind of giving the analogy of what had happened when the calculator came out, right? There was a certain way when the calculator first came out that people asked questions in academics, and they had to change that. Now people think it would be silly to ask the questions they were originally asking back, in the early 1900s. Now, like we ask questions that assume somebody's going to use a calculator and get into the heart of the problem themselves. Story problems became, for instance, a lot more relevant than just lists of math equations. And so I think it's a similar thing is we have to learn to ask a different question, basically encourage them to use the tools, come back and say, now that they've used these tools, how do we evaluate it? And in our model, that's actually complicated, right? Because we have a
Yeah.
model that's not super friendly to that sometimes. But that's been my charge to the individuals I work with, as I said, find better ways, right? Like this
Yeah.
this technology is here, and we need to move faster than the technology is. So
Right. Right.
there is an
Absolutely.
interesting other aspect too, bringing this, I think, back to testing a little bit. So my very first professional job in this industry was at Microsoft. I was a dev tester, basically. So before I became a full-on programmer, they kind of hire you into these roles sometimes. And when I was in the interview process there, they asked me how I would test a toaster, right? The job, this had
Yeah.
nothing to do with the job itself, but really it had everything to do with the job. And so I basically broke down I destroyed the toaster. I started with the simple plug it in, plug it out, try it, right? But then I was like, let's see what happens when we put the fork in the toaster, right? Like that was the things I asked. And after I'd gotten the position afterwards, I asked my boss, who was the one who asked this question, why do you ask this question? It has nothing to do with like this product and everything. And he said, it's because he said, you'd be surprised how many people come into the industry and they come into a job like this and they're like, I plug it in and they're done. That's it, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I said, that's interesting. So over the years, there has been times I've asked people, how would you test a toaster? And it's interesting to see that creative mindset shift, right? And I think that that's where we're at with AI is
Yeah.
if people aren't sure how to ask correct questions to help, teach people through AI, we're basically just trying to test the toaster by plugging it in and toasting something. We're not doing anything more than that. We're
Right.
not destroying it. We're not finding out what its limits are. And
Yeah.
and I think that that's really what I think in testing and with QA, that's where I think we have the most ability is to really get people to say, how can these tools help really amplify what you can do and what you like? So you
Yeah.
don't know the best idea. Well, ask the AI because it already knows all the things everybody else has tried. Now find what the AI is not doing and find that is what we need to test next.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I will say, it's a hot debate, boy, in the testing community. In fact, it's going to be a hot topic at Cast, and we're going to have some pretty fun conversations, I expect, and probably a few debates with people really strong on both sides of the argument. And I think it's one of those things. Well, and you've kind of seen it in the thread here, like people talking a little bit about the AI marketing hype and how
Mhm.
it has led to some of the trends that we've seen in hiring and kind of downsizing of teams. Um, and I do think that is a pendulum in and of itself, right? Where you have, um, this over reliance, people buying into the marketing, uh, you know, reducing their teams, hoping that AI is going to save the day and come in and be the answer that we've all been looking for, to give them the free workforce that.
Yeah, that they're really looking for. And that I think it's something important to preface a lot of this with. Whenever companies say we reduce staff because of AI, these are people who are hitting on the fact that most people don't understand it. AI is pretty bad at these jobs, right? So,
It
um,
is
so
very
if
bad.
they, like it would be a really big red flag, right? If a company like Microsoft laid off a bunch of people because AI replaced their job, right? That's obviously not what's happening in the
Right,
field,
right,
but it doesn't mean that AI is not becoming an expectation as a tool to be used, right? Like
right.
we expect people to, use spell check, right? We expect them to use,
Yeah,
these other tech tools when they're in tech jobs. And so, yeah, so I think people really should read between the lines and really think about what people are really saying when they when they say those things.
right, right. Exactly. Paul Holland, I'm gonna actually show this comment. He says the more we all use the word that or words that AI appears to be doing actions on its own, the more executives will think that testers and developers can be replaced. And I think there was a little bit of that. It seems like we're recovering from that, a little bit. I think Joe, you were mentioning we're seeing, definitely an improvement
Yeah.
in the market today. And I think people are kind of realizing, wait a minute, maybe this blind faith we put in this new technology wasn't right on.
Yep.
I had an interesting question related to that actually recently. Somebody asked if AI could replace CEOs because they're obviously not needed or something weird like that. And I said, that's actually a really interesting question from an AI standpoint, if you understand what's going on here. Since AI is really trained on the data out there, the question is AI really trained on all the CEOs out there? And the answer is no, they're not posting their comments. So I said, if you replace a CEO with AI, you may actually have problems because it's easy, I think, at the bottom sometimes to think the CEOs are, moronic and they don't know how to do their jobs. But there's a lot that CEOs do, right?
Oh, for sure.
And
Absolutely.
the question ends up being is like, can some model that doesn't have any idea what a CEO does, you're now going to have, let's say an AI did replace them, it would be all the people griping on Reddit about what a CEO should do and how they should run their job, but none of them are CEOs, right? And
Right.
so suddenly you're going to have an AI that's running that has no idea what to actually do. And I mean, in some ways it'd be hilarious social experiment to see what happens, but it would also be detrimental to the company. So.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I mean, I don't like any of us who have actually kind of dug into the AI tooling that's out there, especially in the development and testing space. I mean, there is absolutely a place for it, but you have to use some common sense in terms of and your own critical thought and your own experience to kind of determine the value add, right? Because I think one of the things that you're starting to see is people are starting to use it as a crutch. And my brain is very weird because it picks up on patterns very easily. And so one of the things that has always made me laugh about AI is that I could tell immediately when someone was using AI in the professional, like in the workplace. And when ChatGPT first came out, I could see leaders even in the consulting world like utilizing it to put together SOWs and to put together solutions. And I was like, stop. Like, please don't use this as a crutch. Like, sure, use it to come up with ideas. Use it to give you structure, right? And maybe present some ideas that maybe you didn't think of. But you always need to double check it because one, it's going to tell you what you want to hear, always. And it's like that really confident coworker that's like right 30% of the time, 40% of the time back then. And then now it's more like 75, 85% of the time. Like most of the stuff that's coming out of it is true in some form, but then you throw in a little bit of context and suddenly it's off the rails, right? And it's not really getting to the point. That's been my experience anyway. So I'm pretty picky about what I use it for and what I don't.
I think an important distinction is I have a coworker who likes to say this. So he said that there's a difference between hallucination and BS when it comes to AI. He said that hallucination is something where we believe what we're saying, right? We believe what we're doing. BS is when we know we're completely lying. And they said, and the thing is that these AI models don't actually reason, right? And so, so that means that somebody had coded these to specifically lie when they can't figure out an answer. And he said it's actually really important to note because it means that whenever it comes out, like when you have that friend who is always lying to you, you end up taking what they say with a grain of salt. What doesn't mean that what they're saying isn't relevant, but it means that you need to be careful with what they're saying. And then when you realize that that's what's happening, like it's not subjective truth; it is a deliberate lie, right? And so yes. I think it's really good for brainstorming ideas, especially when you get quote unquote writer's block.
Yep,
Right.
exactly.
I find that AI is the easiest way for me to get over writer's block because I can just ask it some random thing and it will spit out garbage, right? And I'll recognize that, especially if it's in subject material that I'm very familiar with. But at that standpoint, then I can get going and then I can refine. But there's usually a point where I'm using the AI, the LLM, to basically do some set of work, and it just doesn't really work to finish it. You got to pull it out and do it elsewhere. So.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Well, I don't want to derail the conversation. So we'll pull it back in a little bit, but I think one of the topics that I think is a little closer to my heart is, I actually went through quite a bit of unemployment time over the past couple of years. And so I can speak to the roller coaster of emotions and mental turmoil that sends one in. And I think it's important for us to kind of touch on that a little bit. Um, anybody who has gone through a riff, who has gone through being laid off or being replaced by technology, or has become redundant, it goes through. Uh, it's a whirlwind of self doubt. It's a whirlwind, and I think there is the older, the more experienced individuals who are currently looking. Joe, to your point, um, you know, they're really struggling right now. I think job seekers are really struggling. You're seeing people struggle for, over a year sometimes, over 2 years sometimes to get back into the workforce. Um, so, thinking about that, what's some advice that you would give them to help them reframe and maybe give them some tools to keep going and to kind of help themselves to kind of get over that hump of self-doubt, um, maybe reframe their strategy in terms of how they're approaching the job search, how they're approaching interviews, how they're approaching getting in front of hiring managers, how they're approaching upskilling.
Yeah, I can try to address that. I think
Yeah.
in a lot of ways the way people find talent has changed, right? Like the way they source talent, the way candidates get to a hiring manager has changed a lot over the years, but a lot recently. So I think like one of the things, like the upskilling thing, is part of it. You've got to show employers that you've been doing the work to upskill and learn these new technologies. I think that's really important because, as we talked about earlier, employers are really trying to figure out how do we harness all this new technology, and they need people that can help them figure those things out. So being able to kind of articulate that is one thing, but I think what I try to tell people that are that have been around a while, that are very experienced, that are maybe in this first time ever going, man, this is the first time I've ever had to look for a job, because I've been able to kind of get each job through my network. And then I tell them, hey, that's exactly what you need to do is applying on LinkedIn, applying on Indeed. Like you have to do those things because maybe you'll get lucky, but you really need to work your network. You really need to, and it's not a comfort zone for a lot of technologists, is getting out to networking events and getting out and asking people for help and working your network and making phone calls and asking people to help you get in front of people. Again, it's out of their comfort zone and for a lot of technologists, but that's really what they need to do. I mean, and that's how they're going to get doors open and get in front of hiring managers. And obviously I'll plug for us. And what I do is working with a recruiter, because we're usually, if we're working on jobs, we're a direct line to the hiring manager. And so you're going to get past the AI gatekeeper and maybe the HR gatekeeper that maybe they don't really know what they're looking for. Right.
Yeah.
So I think leveraging people, like us to help out is big too. But the biggest thing is, work your network. Keep those relationships close. Like, it's just, more important than ever, I think.
Yep. Yeah. As a counterpoint to that, so what about those who are new to, maybe coming out of school, freshly graduating, WGU or another program through another university, and they don't have a network yet, right? What would you guys advise for them?
So I'll tell you the advice I usually give students on this. So a lot of the state schools have pretty large career fairs. And ironically, a lot of professions don't benefit from those. But actually, if you go to some of the big state career fairs, it doesn't matter what school you go to, they don't care at them. If you go to those, you'll meet the groups really quick. They'll do a first interview at those career fairs. bring yourself a stack of resumes, because at those, they're not looking for the digital, they want the hand copied version.
Mm-hmm.
Bring them and go up there. And I've heard a lot of success from students who've done this. And so not like you said, it gets the students are uncomfortable sometimes because they're a bit introverted, or
Right.
in this field is not uncommon, but that's actually, I think, a really easy one. But also, I think there are local events.
Yeah.
Start tapping into the local events that are in your area. Go out and physically meet people. And so, I mean, like, a lot of jobs are remote now, and there's nothing wrong with the remote jobs, but getting out and physically meeting people does give you a huge leg up
It
to
does.
those positions.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and plug CAST right now in the Silicon Slopes, because this is a massive event. We're going to have we will have hiring managers there. We'll have Joe is going to be there.
Yep.
So we're going to have individuals who are very, very well connected. The Association for Software Testing. We are a global community of testers, of developers who have been in this industry. And there's some of us who have been in this industry for decades. There are some of us who have been in this industry a year. And taking advantage of those communities, taking advantage of not only being a part in terms of learning from those communities, joining the conversation. I mean, we've had some great conversation in the chat today. Participating as a speaker, even, right? Getting your name out there and actually building that presence within the community is all that does is help you grow. It is help you not only, and it can be really helpful from a building of some of those, and I don't want to call them soft skills, because they're not soft skills. They're some of the most important skills we can have, right? Learning to sell yourself, learning to feel comfortable talking to people like Jared. You and I, we've never met, right? Now, Joe and I, we've known each other a few years, but being able to hold your own in a conversation like this, where we're talking in a professional setting, we're talking about the industry, and being able to feel confident representing a perspective, and hold your own, and advocating for yourself. I think all of those are some of the probably the lesser touched on skills that you gain from participating in these types of events. So I encourage everybody, whether it's CAST that's happening in August 25th through 27th, please join us. In fact, I will make a plug. There is a really, really great discount happening right now that will be available through the end of the weekend, for you to get members pricing on registration, and that saves you $250 off of registration. So that right there, go take advantage of it, because it's going to be an incredible event. Jared, you're going to be there. Joe, you're going to be there. And it, whether you're able to make that or not, it can be a huge thing. I know ASC, for me, that's part of the reason that I do this. I don't get paid for this. This is not a pay gig. This is a passion gig. And it's one of the most important things that I feel I do, is really building that community and building that network. Yeah, so I get it. All right, let's see, where are we going here? What are some things, so as we wrap up, because we're kind of wrapping up the hour here, so you all have lives, I get it. One of the things that I do want to touch on before we wrap up are, what are the top skills that those who are out there right now in the job market looking for their next gig, or maybe they are unhappy in their current role and they're looking to get to that next level. What are some of, from a development, testing, DevOps perspective, engineering realm, what are some of the skills and the competencies that you would advise them to gain traction on immediately? And I know we've talked a little bit about of AI, right? That's obvious. But what are some of the other ones?
Yeah, I'll talk to at least how I always feel about this. Data structures. From a programming standpoint, any coding level position, you're going to need to know data structures. They're going to
Mm,
ask it in the questions. Object-oriented programming is fine and everything, but I mean, people are going to ask you, sorting questions and trees and whatever, right? And those are the questions that programmers like to ask other programmers. Even if you're not a programmer, I think data structures is really, really important, because you need to be able to show, by the way, I can be in any of these positions. I've chosen to be here, right? And because
right.
that gives you a lot of respect within those communities, with those developers. Developers are not the most people friendly all the time, and you have to sort of prove your skill to them constantly also. And so I think that specific course, because it's everything that leads up to that and up to that skill set, that I think ends
Yeah.
up becoming really important. So that's a big one. And then I would say just software engineering paradigms,
Yep.
including every single aspect of it, design, QA. You need to understand all of it. You need not just be a programmer, but you do need to understand how software is built and how to build a product, and that it is really product development at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, exactly with what Jared said, and not to harp on the AI thing, but as people are coming out looking for work, being able to articulate to an employer your experience with AI tools, how you use them in your day to day, how you would leverage them in this position that you're applying for, I think is really important, because again, most companies are trying to figure it out themselves, so they want to hire people that they feel can help them kind of get there. So being able
Yeah.
to kind of show companies and hiring managers, hey, here's what I've done with AI. Here's how I play with it. Here's the good and the bad of it. Here's what I think it's great for. Here's what I don't, and be able to kind of talk through and articulate those challenges and thoughts about how you can be successful in that world. I think it is very important for any, whether it's QA, dev, you're
Yeah.
getting into a tech support role, like
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
it is, maybe. And even leadership. Most of the people we have interviewing for leadership roles, companies want to know, hey, how would you leverage AI in this
Yeah.
particular position as a leader, right?
Yep.
And so people have to just be thinking about that. Don't have to have all the answers, but having to be able to you have to be able to kind of articulate a thought and a pattern and know that
Show that you're kind of at least digging into it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna throw that out to our chat, people who are conversing with us in the chat as well. What are the skills that you recommend in terms of, if you were to come up with a top 5 list, what would that top 5 list look like? I know for me, working a lot with enterprise delivery teams, my role has shifted a little bit in the last few years, to a much more strategic kind of role that looks at more than just the testing, more than just the quality piece of it, but looks at kind of how we're getting to the results. Um, Looking at the larger perspectives around when we look at automation, right? What does automation actually mean? Uh, and how are we utilizing those tools to get to the end that we want, right? And I think for those who are currently in the realm of quality and delivery, some of the biggest skills that you can see right now, that are just in demand, like they're looking, I know we are looking for people who understand kind of test data management and understanding the data layer and how to solve problems of getting data sets that actually do what we need to do from from a testing and automation perspective, understanding how to automate not just tests but use automation to enable, right? So whether that is continuous integration systems, continuous delivery, continuous deploy, understanding the development pipelines, right? Containerization, orchestration, some of these scanning tools, the SAST and the DAS scanning tools, like digging into those and understanding how we utilize those to really help the quality perspective, right? Those areas, I see so often organizations really struggling to figure out how to implement those in a way that's adding value. Like they've all heard about it and they're like, oh, let's go use containerization. Like we're going to go throw Docker in, right? But then they don't build an actual strategy behind that to kind of help them scale that out and help them do it in a way that's safe, do it in a way that's secure, do it in a way that adds value. Um, so, all of those deep, like if you are in the testing industry today and you're looking kind of to differentiate yourself, being able to have those conversations and talk to how you would solve those are massive. Paul, you talk critical thinking, creativity, yeah, all of those. Um, and I would argue, yes, you can try to teach those in a class, but some of that is learning by doing, right, and getting out there, influencing, speaking, writing, articulating yourself, all great things. Um, yeah, learning and applying new technologies, learning how to learn uh, is a big one. In fact, Jared, do you have any thoughts on that? Learning how to learn, because
Yeah,
we
yeah.
work with people from all
I'm
backgrounds,
reminded
right?
of Scrum, by the way, an agile course. You can teach somebody in a course about Scrum. You can give them some simulations and everything, and they really come out, even though they did it and they passed the course, they have no clue. It's not until they do it that they really end up understanding, right? Like,
Yeah,
not until you encounter the problems that actually happen. The most powerful thing you can really do is be part of a project in a group with people and build something.
yeah,
Like you said, a lot of the tools you're talking about become, especially if you do it right with groups, they really start playing with all this different stuff, right? They're like, oh, by the way, we threw this into a container in Docker. Look at what I was able to do. Nobody else understands what they're talking about. The next thing you know, that person teaches the other people, right? I think that it really is this process of building and moving forward. We can just give them the tools. I mean, if we build some courses correct, right, we can get some of this going in a course, but really it's about once they really start hitting the real products and real projects,
agree.
that this all ends up making a lot more sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I agree. I agree. And Joe, are you kind of seeing that from a hiring perspective? Are you kind of seeing that be the case in terms of as you're sending candidates in for interviews and you're seeing hiring managers and what they're looking at in terms of the differentiators, right, in their candidate?
Yeah,
Like
I
if
mean,
you were to give a top 5 list in terms of, I know you said AI,
mhm,
and absolutely, but like
yep.
what are some of the things what are those special things that they're looking for in their candidates that they're going to be selecting?
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm reading some of these comments too. And I think, critical thinking, communication skills, ability
Yeah,
to be a continuous learner, all those things are super important. And the bottom line is like, those are really not more important. People generally, when we're working with people to help them get hired, they're going to have a baseline of technical skills. They're going to have an
yeah,
understanding. Obviously, some people are better at that stuff than others, but once the person gets to an interview, most of the time they're looking for those soft skills, the
yeah,
communication skills, critical thinking skills, the question, Jared, that you mentioned about like that you got about, hey, test this toaster. We they're asking questions like that. Hey, how do you deal situational questions? How do you deal with, you know, handling a problem? And you wouldn't think that a person applying for a technical role would be asked those kind of questions, but that's a lot of what separates the one that gets hired from the one that doesn't, is how they handle maybe conflict resolution or just
mm,
things like that. So yeah, critical thinking, communication skills, obviously thinking about AI, that beating that one up a lot, but those are all like super important. And then the baseline of technology skills is, most people coming out of a good program like WGU or other colleges are going to have a pretty good baseline, as long as they're coachable and teachable.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah. And one thing to mention too, as far as, or to kind of get your perspectives on too, how can hiring organizations or organizations who have teams right now, how can they kind of, what would you recommend to them in terms of helping prepare their own staff for kind of this next era of technology evolution? Would you have any advice for them?
yeah, I mean, I could go on for a long, and we probably don't have
I was
time
going to
for
say
this,
that's probably a whole hour
but I
discussion,
think we
isn't it?
see it a lot. We see it a lot. I think companies would really benefit from having a better kind of more systematic hiring process,
Yeah.
streamlined, having, kind of, we call it like interview loops, having the same people involved through an interview. A lot of times we'll see customers of ours, hiring teams, they'll be looking for, say, a project manager, and they interview 4 or 5 people.
Hmm.
but 4 or 5 different people from their team are conducting those interviews. So
Right.
the feedback's always different. It's like, well, how do you know who you like if
Right. It's all
talking,
subjective.
they're not
Yeah.
having the same interview. They're not being asked the same questions.
Right.
They're talking to the same people. So the feedback's so then they end up hiring somebody that doesn't work out. And it's like, well, how did this happen? I'm like, well, I can tell you because you didn't know who you were hiring because you didn't have a process, right? So
Yeah.
I think getting some, but again, that we could go on forever, but having a process in place, knowing what to ask, and having the same people run through the process so you get a subjective, you know, outcome, right? If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, any advice for getting through the technology kind of barrier? We haven't really talked a lot about that, and I don't want to go too much into it, but is there any tips that you would give job seekers for getting past the ATS systems? The, I know that's a hot topic right now. And I know we're coming to the end here, but I don't want to get through this without touching on it at least a little. Any advice on that front?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, that's a hard one because
Yeah.
more and more companies are using those tools to do an initial screening because it saves time, and I think they don't realize what they're missing. They're missing a lot of great candidates by doing it that way.
Sure.
But I think it'll take a while for companies to realize, okay, this isn't working. They got to kind of revert back. So in the meantime, I mean, there's no real answer. I mean, we've had people, using AI tools to say, hey, how do I modify my resume to meet
Yeah.
these requirements? And then that is no good either because then you're getting people that maybe aren't the right fit, but their
Right.
resume is looking really great that are getting
Yeah.
again, I don't know. I guess my answer is work with a recruiter right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
I'm
think
just
it is a
kidding, but
reality. I think
it's
it is a reality, and you're right. I think working, getting with recruiters, going back to the network,
mhm,
job fairs, like you were saying, Jared, those are always,
yep,
especially if you're just getting into the industry, those can be huge.
yep. Much human interaction as you can have, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
Anything to bypass the bots, right?
right.
I mean, like those
exactly.
networking events, knowing people, these things help that, I think.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I don't think it's an easy answer because everybody's just saying, hey, go apply to these positions, and then nobody ever hears anything again.
Right.
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 Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I went through, I tried two different avenues both times. So I went through two different layoff periods. And the first one, I was suckered into some of the executive coaching, kind of get get connected to their networks, because there are companies out there who are they have their own networks. They're utilizing a lot of tools to go scrape the internet for all of the jobs and build their databases of roles, and give kind of coach through redoing your resume. And some of them are incredibly high valuable. Some of them I find to be a little bit predatory. And I think it's important to kind of differentiate those. So be wary of that as job seekers. I think that's a piece of advice I would give, having gone through this recently. um, and but again, getting back to the community, right? Like joining the community, joining AST. There are so many developer communities out there. I know Joe runs a fun executive meeting here in Salt Lake City. And remind me of the name of it, Joe.
It's just called the Salt Lake City Executive Roundtable.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's fantastic. In fact, that's how Joe and I actually met.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
um,
Absolutely.
so yeah. So, I mean, any opportunity you get to kind of connect with people is just makes a night and day difference. So do not sit at home. Do not sit behind your keyboard. Get out there and interact. And wrapping this conversation up, thank you guys. Joe, thank you for bringing Gravity IT to the table. Jared, thank you for bringing Western Governors to the table. I look forward to having you both at our event, August 25th through the 27th. We've barely scratched the conversation at this point. And so there are going to be so many more opportunities there to kind of dig in, maybe even have some one-on-one time with these guys because they know what they're doing. and they can give you advice and thoughts, and having recruiters and having these people in your network is always a good thing. So thank you both for your wisdom and your thoughts, and we're going to wrap it up for today, but have a great rest of your week and into the weekend.
Yep.
And we will see you in August at Cast. Again, there are some fantastic discounts available if you are watching this thread either through the recording or live. Get out there, get your tickets. We are quickly filling up, and you're going to want to get those before, and frankly, you're going to want to get them at that price. So get out there and get your tickets and join us. So with that, we're signing off. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you later.